Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, residents of Easton, the Easton Film Festival is pleased to present another in a series of shows on the 2002 festival. Your host is Ron Leone. Ron was the head judge for the 2002 competition and is a professor of communications at Stonehill College. Ron received his PhD in communications from Syracuse University. Tonight, Ron will interview two of the judges in last year's competition. They are Bob Gaulet, professor at Stonehill, and Bill Lyttle, a resident of Southeastern. And now, here's Ron.
Welcome to EFF Presents. My name's Ron Leone, and tonight we're doing a very special show for you. It's what we call our Judges Show, and I'd like to welcome two of the judges for the Easton Film Festival, Bob Gaulet.
Hello.
And Bill Lyttle.
Ron, thank you.
Nice to have you both here. Bob is a professor at Stonehill. He teaches in the English department, an esteemed and honored professor there, and the director of our cinema studies program. And Bill Lyttle is a Easton resident.
That's correct.
The director of the Key program,
Right.
film aficionado, fan, lover. And welcome you both, and thank you very much
It's
for
great to be here.
your time to be here on the show and as judges for the film festival. My primary involvement with the show, with the festival, is as a judge. And when we kind of sat down to try and figure out who would make up a good panel, we felt that people who love film and people who know film would be the ideal choices. So I wanted to talk a little bit for the audience tonight about the process we went through, what your responses to the films were, and how you felt in the role of judge, and maybe what we looked for, what we liked.
Great.
So, I mean, Bill, what did you kind of take from the experience of being a judge for the film festival?
Well, this is the first time that I've been involved in judging any films. As you said, I watch hundreds of movies during the course of a year, so I really love films and movies. So it was a great experience for me personally. I know that we had certain criteria by which we judged the films. I know for myself, certainly I want to make sure that the people who made the films lived in Easton, and 90% was filmed in Easton, and it fitted the proper time format. But then I know that you had laid out some criteria by which we judge the films. Perhaps you could share that with the audience. That might be helpful for them to know some of the criteria we used.
Certainly. When we sat down to do on Judgment Day, we met on the campus of Stonehill, and we sat down and watched all the entries in their entirety, and came up with we had a first round where we each kind of evaluated the films, not much discussion at all. And then we sat down and compared notes, and we looked at various categories. What was your
That's what I liked about your criteria, really. And could we go through those categories? I think it would be useful for the audience.
Sure. I took a moment to jot them down. We looked at the camera work. We looked at the quality of editing, what we called the visual style, the design, how people set their scenes up. We looked at sound and the use of music. We also looked at the storytelling ability, how the story was conveyed. And we looked at overall creativity. And other categories which came out of the process. I mean, we had a very interesting outcome that day, right?
Absolutely.
Right. I mean, we weren't interested only in the what of the films, but the how, too. How was the story told, or how was the point made, and why was it told, and why was it made?
That's right. I mean, what were your early reactions?
What I thought we found interesting is that we did all judge them independently, and we rated them and scored them independently. And if I remember correctly, which a little while ago, but we agreed on the winners independently. We had some discussion about who was first, second, and third, but we agreed upon the finalists 4 films, all without discussing them amongst ourselves.
Which was I was very surprised
right.
at that response, but I mean, it in one sense, it showed that I guess the criteria that we had laid out were applied well. But we ended up with the eventual winners and and one other film that with a group of 5 finalists.
I was going to say, I think also that for me, again, being a first-time judge and perhaps not being as technically proficient as both you are, because you've had experience in judging films before, is that certainly every submission offered something, had some positive attributes. I think the winning films for me hit me more emotionally than perhaps some of the other films. So Untitled for me hit me emotionally. It was, for me, sadness. The Waitress certainly was a comedy. The French and Indian War was some historical facts, perhaps that I didn't know, so I learned something from that film. But each one of them I had an emotional reaction to. And perhaps the ones that won the not more positive emotional reaction, but a stronger emotional reaction. So I think they were very enjoyable.
I would say, yeah, I mean, you could always argue that the effectiveness of a film in getting its points across, whether it touches you here or it gets you thinking about something or feeling something, means that it's, the how, as you pointed out, is really being done well. I mean, what stood out for you, Bob?
Well, I was thinking about the first prize winner and how there was a variety of shots in developing the story, and the shots had a logic to them.
Absolutely.
This is so important to figure out, well, why was this photographed from that angle or from that distance?
Yes, I mean, there was a great deal of variety, and one thing that is I want to try and kind of do in the second half of the show today is talk about some suggestions or recommendations that we might have as judges, and hopefully you'll both be joining us again to judge the second round. I certainly hope so.
If I'm asked.
Yeah, I think we're being recruited.
I know, I'm shameless in that way. But clearly, I mean, some things that we could suggest are maybe common things to try and avoid. I mean, variety of shots and visual perspectives.
But also the logic of that variety.
That's
too.
right. That's right. Not variety for variety's own sake.
That's right. That's right.
And a good story. I mean, a story that has a beginning, a middle, and end that hangs together.
Yes.
Sometimes we see films that, even certainly outside the Easton Film Festival, that I've observed that have a great beginning to the story, a great middle, and then it just doesn't end. It just hangs or goes on too far. So a cohesive storytelling, I think, is essential to a high-quality show.
Absolutely. I mean, we've all seen movies that just fall apart in the third act, as we say, and seem to have no good way of resolving whatever they've set out to resolve. And I think that was the strength of some of our winners. I mean, Untitled, we can talk about the individual films, but there was some wonderful shots. The car shot at the beginning where the accident takes place, and then there's some nice photography choices in the library, if you remember that scene where they're sitting down.
Powerful scene.
Very impressive given the limited technical means.
That's right, and now less limited because Melinda won, so she's increased her spending, I'm sure, for film equipment. One of the other points I wanted to bring out, and I think was an attribute of that film, and not one of the official criteria, was acting. And this really applies to people who are making fictional films. It is a challenge, clearly, to doing fiction on film is the quality of acting. That was where some films certainly did suffer. And that was not one of them. I mean, when it's clear that people are reading lines and not really concerned with acting and kind of conveying emotion. But instead of just making sure that they've said their line without flubbing it.
And again, it was interesting, that film was very, if I recall it correctly, there's very little actually dialogue in her acting. And if you think of The Waitress, certainly there was no dialogue, but there was some great acting by the participants. It's funny, in each one, I think of particular scenes that stand out. I was thinking of The Waitress, that the fellow playing the piano with the dark glasses on, sort of to me stole the show. I think that, for me personally. So each show had, some particular thing that was particularly powerful.
Yes, I think that it's best to go with, perhaps a more modest project and achieve the goals of that project, rather than go for something really ambitious and then ask your actors to do something that's not within their range.
That's right. We really aren't. I mean, we're asking mostly non-professionals to do the job, and I mean, and it certainly is. It's a lot of pressure to have people on camera when it's not their natural kind of way of going about their life, being on camera, trying to remember lines and still kind of convey emotions and give the sense of drama to a situation. It's challenging, and when people are struggling with that, it kind of hurts. It undermines the overall project.
Do you think, Ron, given the criteria that we used this year, that from where you sit, that you would change that criteria in judging next year at all? Have you thought about?
I think that maybe we might have to, and I think this happened naturally, but maybe formally we have to think about how documentaries should be treated versus fictional films, because they present different challenges and they have different kinds of, they call on different skills even in making the films. I mean, maybe you can comment on this, but they certainly have different needs, right?
Well, this is one case where I think that variety is very necessary.
Right.
Camera angles, camera distances, it's very important, especially if, let me backtrack. I think I would advise people not to take too heavily a talking heads approach.
Right. Right, which is the tendency with a documentary, is to have lots of interviews.
Right, that it isn't enough to say something, you have to say it interestingly.
That's right. I think Heavy does that well, and and the French and Indian War, both of those films. I mean, French and Indian War is a documentary kind of recreation, a la what we see a lot of more so today.
There was also a film about Borderlands that I thought was of some interest.
Our other finalist film, actually, that was really, I mean, very well shot.
Yes.
If you remember, there's some really outstanding shots of high-angle kind of shots of a person on a bench with their dog. I mean, a very memorable image, and
it was constructed very well. It had certain themes or motifs, and it stuck to those consistently. It was impressive.
As were a number. I mean, let me ask you. I mean, overall, what was your sense of the quality of the work and what the community had to offer?
I personally think, given this was the first time that Easton has done this, that the quality of the films was excellent. Again, given the fact that they weren't professionally produced. I think everybody certainly reflected everybody putting in a lot of work and a lot of hard effort, and I think it speaks well to the folks in Easton. I mean, particularly in the people in the school department. I can't remember if it was 10 or 12 films that they put together. It was a great project for the kids. It was great feedback, great experience for them. So I think that, is it the Sundance Film Festival? Maybe next year. But I thought they did an excellent job, and they all should be commended for it.
I think so too. I like the school projects very much that used pre-existing materials, photographs, for example, and people have learned something from Ken Burns, evidently.
That's right. That's right.
And
who's Ken Burns?
Yeah. I agree with you. I was very impressed with the schoolwork.
Yeah, I mean, if you remember, there was another one about honoring Easton's veterans.
Right.
That was, and heroes, about heroism. There was another one.
Yes.
And they went into archives. That was actually one of our board members and one of our most important people in the Easton Film Festival, Ed Hands, who teaches at Oliver Ames. And this was his students' work. I mean, he really, we can't thank and commend him enough for the effort that he put forth in this and continues to.
That's right.
And another documentary that I liked very much, and I think it was done by one of the school groups, was the one about the mystery of.
Yes.
That's the one. Yes, that was excellent. I mean, it revolved around a mysterious kind of death, right? They stumbled upon a grave site.
And it was a history project, but it was brought to life by the use of these materials.
Absolutely. So you think about it, there were a number of films, these documentaries, that were very
Right.
educational in nature that I certainly learned something from by watching them that I didn't know about,
Right.
you know, the town of Easton. And then for me, the other category of those, you know, the fictional, the more that hit me emotionally, not just intellectually. So I think it was a great grouping of films that was submitted.
And I agree with you. I think maybe we should set up a separate set of criteria for nonfiction films.
I think that is the logical thing to do, because it's hard. Sometimes it's hard because they have different goals.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
and certainly they're both about storytelling to some degree, but I mean, the ways that they reach their goals are so vastly different at times that it may feed itself to having just a different set of standards
Right.
in
Right.
mind when we're viewing a fictional film or a nonfiction film.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe, go ahead, Bob.
Oh, there was one other documentary that I think we should talk about, and that's the one dealing with the music group.
Heavy.
Heavy.
Yes.
Yes. I think actually a very polished and professional looking film.
Is the band still together? Wasn't that the
That,
Yeah.
No, they broke up, at least last
After
we
the
heard.
film. Yeah. After
At
they
the end
made
of the film,
they-
yes.
they broke up.
Very
Oh, I didn't know
professionally
that.
done.
Yeah.
Very professional look to it. Sounded
Yes.
good, mixed. Again, a documentary that moved.
Right.
And certainly incorporated talking heads, but also
Hung together
other-
very, very well.
That's right.
Right, it was
And,
very so told the story and hung together tightly.
and knew how long to hold a shot.
Yeah.
Right.
And in black and white, looked crisp and clean. I mean, it was well done.
Yeah, this is so important that the films have a certain rhythm. And that one
Yes.
had a good editing rhythm to it.
Yes, absolutely, definitely. And I guess we only have a couple of minutes left, I believe. So what I wanted to kind of close with today is get maybe some of your recommendations, suggestions for those people who may be thinking about doing something fictional and then non-fictional, and maybe just for anybody interested or everyone overall. Some of the things maybe we could stress for success in putting together a fictional film or nonfiction.
Keep it simple.
Keep it simple,
I
definitely,
agree. I agree.
definitely.
And short.
And short isn't bad. No, maybe things like for fictional filmmakers, rehearsal.
Yes.
Rehearse your actors, get them comfortable with their lines, so that when it comes time to do it for real,
And
on
storyboard.
Storyboard, I mean, 30-second explanation.
Oh,
if
a
you could.
storyboard is just a graphic representation of what the film will look like, shot by shot.
Right, that you can draw out,
Right.
basically. I mean,
Right.
Hitchcock and Scorsese and lots
Right.
of famous filmmakers are well known for storyboarding
Right.
intricately.
Right.
I would also say that people should not be intimidated about submitting a film. They should not be discouraged. Everybody who has an interest in doing it should follow through on the desire to do it.
That's right, give it a shot.
Absolutely.
And again, for those fictional filmmakers, don't be afraid to do multiple takes
Right.
from different angles,
Yes.
and experiment with where you put your camera relative to your subjects.
And make sure those shots are logical.
Yes, that's right. And I would say for the documentarians out there, don't be afraid to keep shooting, and bring a lot of footage, because again, editing is such an important
Yes.
role. We
Right.
talk about the production process as having 3 phases: pre-production, production, and post-production. For the documentarian, a lot of times it really comes together in post at the
Right.
end. Whereas for the fiction filmmaker, they really have to put a lot of thought up front to scripting, working with actors, writing that interesting story to keep
I
us
think you two
engrossed.
make excellent judges.
You do too.
They have great
Well,
ideas.
I think you guys were both great, and
Thank you.
I'm so happy that you joined
you.
us for this show and are part of the film festival judging.
Thank you.
And to our viewers, I'd like to thank you again for tuning in. And if you want to try and get in touch with us, please write to us at EFF PO Box 360, Northeastern Mass 02356, and online email support@eastonfilmfestival.com. I'm Ron Leone. Bob Gaulet and Bill Lyttle, thank you again.
you.
Keep making films.